Shepherded by a desire to be helpful, individuals often find themselves trapped in an unending cycle of saying yes to every request until personal priorities vanish beneath others' demands. Canvas artist, community volunteer, project lead, family mediator, roles accumulate until days overflow with obligations. Mornings begin with full calendars, afternoons vanish in back-to-back meetings, and evenings dissolve into unfinished to-do lists. Eventually, physical fatigue becomes emotional exhaustion, and the once enthusiastic helper becomes a harried shell, constantly juggling conflicting commitments. At home, family dinners become battlegrounds of rushed conversations as the overwhelmed individual they once knew returns late, head spinning from the day's pleas for assistance. Friends place calls that go unanswered, hobbies drift away like forgotten hobbies, and self-care retreats to an empty corner of memory. Weekends, once a reprieve, transform into marathon catch-ups, catching up on laundry, email, personal errands, and a growing mountain of unfinished favors. In this state, a simple invitation to join a friend for coffee feels intrusive, as if yet another yes pushes the human supply meter dangerously close to zero. In professional settings, the pattern intensifies. A coworker asks for help proofing a report due tomorrow, so the obliging individual cancels lunch plans. Then a manager probes for volunteers for a cross-department task force. Again, the answer is an immediate yes. Soon, important deliverables for one's own role shift down the priority list. The quality of work diminishes, deadlines slip, and the sense of competence erodes. Yet the inner voice, steeped in ingrained people-pleasing habits, insists that refusing any request equates to letting others down. The ripple effects become evident. Clients experience delays in responses. Teammates sense frustration under polite smiles. The individual's reputation shifts from reliable collaborator to overextended bottleneck. Stress hormones surge as cortisol spikes, fueling anxiety and eroding patience. Sleep becomes fitful, peppered with dreams of unfinished tasks and rising panic over unanswered emails. Boundaries dissolve until the concept of personal limits feels foreign, as if one exists simply to fulfill everyone else's needs. In these circumstances, morale plummets. Enthusiasm for meaningful projects fades beneath the weight of incessant yeses. Brain fog creeps in during high-stake meetings, making strategic contributions rare. Key ideas slip away before they can be voiced. The individual's true talents lie buried beneath an avalanche of obligations that never reflect personal goals or values. A relentless yes culture keeps them tethered to others' agendas, robbing them of autonomy and inner fulfillment. The cumulative toll reveals itself not just in emotional weariness, but in escalating resistance to new requests. A single extra ask can trigger an internal meltdown, a surge of guilt at even contemplating refusal, followed by simmering resentment toward the requester and self-reproach for yet another overloaded schedule. This resentment often remains unspoken, surfacing as passive-aggressive compliance, agreeing without intention to follow through, missing deadlines, or producing half-hearted efforts. Trust erodes as relationships fracture under the weight of unmet expectations. Such overwhelm arises from a fundamental confusion between generosity and self-neglect. While kindness and helpfulness embody positive social connections, unchecked people-pleasing sacrifices personal well-being. It creates an unsustainable dynamic. Others learn to expect perpetual accommodation, while the accommodating individual sacrifices priorities and identity. Bit by bit, personal values dim as external demands shine ever brighter. The boundary between helpful colleague and ever-available doormat blurs until exhaustion becomes a perpetual state of being. The paradox intensifies. Saying no feels unkind, yet saying yes perpetuates self-punishment. Every acquiescence demands yet another, creating a feedback loop where the individual believes they must continue accommodating to preserve relationships. Meanwhile, people close to them, managers, colleagues, friends, adapt to their availability, rarely considering that support should be reciprocal. The imbalance spirals, and the capacity to serve others dwindles in direct proportion to the volume of unwarranted yeses. Recognizing the problem's scope marks the first step toward relief. Unchecked agreement is a strategy gone awry, an attempt to secure approval and connection that instead erodes autonomy. The cascade of obligations that once bolstered self-worth transmutes into a prison of compulsion. To escape, individuals must understand the psychological roots of their people-pleasing and learn to reclaim the power of no. Only by creating deliberate pauses pauses between request and response can they restore equilibrium between self-care and service, turning overwhelm into mindful choice. When people repeatedly say yes at the expense of their own needs, they often mistake approval seeking for genuine connection. Alfred Adler distinguished between social interest, a cooperative striving for the welfare of others, and people-pleasing, a compensatory behavior driven by fears of rejection and inferiority. In the former, actions emerge from a sense of shared purpose. In the latter, they arise from a belief that one's worth depends on unanimous approval. Understanding this distinction serves as the foundation for setting healthy boundaries without guilt. Adler argued that every individual possesses an innate drive toward belonging, yet this drive can be distorted when personal value becomes tethered to external validation. People-pleasing springs from an underlying inferiority complex where perceived deficiencies in worth compel excessive accommodation. Pleasing others momentarily soothes the pang of unworthiness but leaves the core insecurity intact. Over time, this dynamic amplifies, transforming simple acts of cooperation into compulsive sacrifices. Tasks that once brought joy become burdensome obligations, and relationships built on mutual respect fray under the weight of unreciprocated giving. In contrast, social interest arises from a secure sense of self and a genuine desire to contribute. It operates on the principle of Gemeinschaftsgefühl, or community feeling, which entails empathic engagement and responsible participation. Individuals guided by social interest ask themselves, how can I serve the group without compromising my values? Their decisions balance personal well-being with collective benefit. Saying no in this context does not signal selfishness, but rather integrity, an honest assessment of one's capacity to contribute meaningfully. By declining requests that exceed reasonable limits, they preserve the ability to offer higher quality support in areas where their involvement matters most. People-pleasing, by contrast, lacks this evaluative filter. Requests are accepted reflexively, driven by the unconscious hope that compliance will secure affection or approval. Psychologically, each acquiescence grants a fleeting relief from self-doubt, yet it carries a hidden cost: depletion of personal resources and erosion of genuine agency. Over time, the people-pleaser mistakes exhaustion for character flaw and guilt for evidence of unkindness, deepening the inferiority complex. Every yes thus becomes both cure and poison, perpetuating a cycle of self-neglect disguised as altruism. Failure to distinguish between these two modes of interaction manifests in predictable patterns. First, personal priorities fade as the desire to be helpful eclipses the pursuit of meaningful goals. Work projects stagnate, creative sparks dim, and self-care routines collapse under an avalanche of obligations that carry little internal resonance. Second, anxiety spikes whenever a decision to refuse arises. The people-pleaser anticipates conflict or disappointment, interpreting any refusal as proof of personal unlovability. This anticipation hinders clear thinking, making boundary setting feel like an existential risk rather than a reasonable act of self-preservation. Adler's insights suggest that transforming people-pleasing into social interest requires cultivating self-esteem rooted in competence and community. Rather than seeking reassurance through each accepted request, individuals learn to measure worth by the quality of contribution and the health of relationships. They recognize that sincere cooperation rests on the ability to say both yes and no in appropriate measure. A refusal delivered with respect preserves dignity for both parties. An agreement made with clarity and intention fosters trust and accountability. Practically, this shift begins with self-awareness, identifying the internal triggers that compel automatic compliance. Journaling exercises can illuminate the thoughts that surface when faced with a request. I must not disappoint. They will think I'm lazy, or my value depends on their approval. By externalizing these beliefs, individuals gain the power to question their validity. Are they true? Do they reflect personal values or inherited patterns of seeking validation? Such critical reflection weakens the grip of people-pleasing narratives and opens space for deliberate choice. Simultaneously, individuals can strengthen social interest through small acts of selective generosity. Instead of saying yes to every demand, they choose a few areas where their strengths align with genuine needs. For instance, offering detailed feedback in a domain of expertise or volunteering time for a project that aligns with personal passion yields deeper satisfaction and visible impact. This targeted approach reinforces the principle that meaningful contribution arises not from breadth of compliance, but from depth of engagement. Another Adlerian strategy involves reframing refusal, viewing no not as selfish withdrawal, but as a necessary preservation of the capacity to give. In this light, declining inappropriate requests becomes an act of responsibility, ensuring that one's energy remains available for tasks that matter most. This perspective transforms boundary setting from an adversarial interaction into a respectful negotiation of mutual limits. It affirms that every individual has finite resources, time, attention, emotional bandwidth, and that honoring those limits is essential for sustainable collaboration. Adler also emphasized the importance of encouragement, both self-directed and interpersonal. People-pleasers often internalize harsh self-criticism when they fail to meet every expectation. Cultivating a practice of internal encouragement, acknowledging small successes, celebrating honest refusals, and affirming personal values builds inner resilience. Likewise, extending genuine encouragement to others, recognizing when colleagues honor their own boundaries, fosters a culture that values integrity over relentless accommodation. Over time, integrating social interest into daily decision-making rewires relational dynamics. Others come to respect clear boundaries, understanding that no signals authenticity rather than rejection. Mutual respect deepens, and collaborations flourish within well-defined parameters. The formerly overextended helper evolves into a trusted collaborator whose yeses carry weight because they emerge from deliberate choice. In this balanced state, saying no with confidence becomes a natural extension of sincere cooperation, honoring both personal limits and collective well-being. Establishing clear boundaries begins with recognizing personal limits, knowing when resources such as time, energy, and emotional capacity have reached their threshold. A helpful approach involves mapping one's boundary zones across different domains, work projects, social engagements, and family obligations. By charting the frequency and intensity of requests received in each zone, individuals gain a tangible sense of where overwhelm originates. For instance, a professional may note that 5 impromptu meeting requests in a single day leaves no room for focused work, or that nightly social invitations erode self-care routines. This diagnostic step transforms vague discomfort into actionable insight, pinpointing precisely where no must eventually be spoken. Once boundary zones are identified, practical techniques emerge for erecting and maintaining limits. The pause and plan method offers a simple template. When a request arrives, whether a colleague's spontaneous ask or a family member's favor, pause before responding. Use that pause to mentally assess alignment with personal priorities and resource availability. If capacity exists, agree. If not, defer. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. This response buys breathing room, detaching the initial reflexive yes from the final answer. Deferral also signals that one's time merits consideration, subtly shifting expectations and preserving autonomy. Another effective technique is the negotiated compromise. When outright refusal feels too abrupt or relationship dynamics complicate direct decline, propose a middle ground. I can't lead the project, but I could review your draft on Thursday. By offering a scaled-down alternative, individuals signal willingness to support while preserving core priorities. This approach aligns with social interest by balancing personal capacity with a genuine intention to help. Over time, colleagues come to recognize that assistance flows not from unbounded compliance but from deliberate, sustainable commitments. A third strategy involves setting office hours or defined availability windows. Professionals can communicate these limits by updating calendars with blocks labeled deep work or focus time, and by including brief notes in email signatures or status messages, available for collaboration 10 to 11 a.m. and 3 to 4 p.m. Such overt markers create external cues that discourage unscheduled requests. When a teammate pings outside those windows, a polite reminder, "I'm in deep work mode now, let's connect at 3 p.m. reinforces the boundary without conflict. Regularly upholding these rhythms develops respect for one's time and nurtures a culture where focused effort is protected. In personal realms, analogous techniques apply. Social boundary setting might involve designating family time during certain evenings or weekends, communicated in advance. I'm unplugging on Saturday mornings for self-care. When friends or relatives propose activities that encroach on those slots, the defender of that boundary can offer alternative dates or times. Similarly, financial boundaries emerge by planning budgets and adhering to spending limits. An initial no to an expensive group gift can be framed as respect for personal financial health rather than rejection of generosity. Importantly, boundary techniques rest on consistent follow-through. Stating limits without honoring them undermines credibility and invites repeated transgressions. If one declares, "I'll review only one draft per week," then accommodates extra requests routinely, the boundary dissolves. To fortify consistency, pairing boundary setting with accountability mechanisms, such as journaling each refusal and noting its outcome, reinforces commitment. Over time, reviewing these entries reveals patterns of successful boundary maintenance and highlights areas needing reinforcement. Addressing internal resistance is equally crucial. People-pleasing impulses often trigger guilt and fear at the moment of refusal. Here, cognitive rehearsal serves as a preparatory exercise. Individuals mentally script responses and practice them aloud, strengthening neural pathways that associate refusal with legitimacy rather than shame. For example, rehearsing, "I appreciate the invitation, but my focus commitments won't allow it this week," builds fluency so that when the real moment arrives, the words come more naturally. Coupled with deep breathing techniques or brief mindfulness pauses, cognitive rehearsal anchors the emotional balance needed for assertive boundary setting. Technological tools can further support these efforts. Calendar blockers, task management apps, and automated email responders become allies in maintaining limits. An out-of-office message, "I'm offline until Tuesday. Urgent matters, please contact Jane," signals unavailability without personal negotiation. Task boards that visually separate in progress from requested tasks highlight capacity constraints, making it easier to justify declines when the in-progress column is full. Such visual aids externalize boundaries, reducing the burden on memory and willpower. Simultaneously, cultivating a supportive environment amplifies individual boundary setting. Sharing personal limits with a trusted colleague or friend creates an alliance that normalizes refusal. Co-workers can mutually respect each other's focus times. Family members can honor designated self-care periods. Collective boundary agreements, such as no meeting Mondays at the team level, scale personal techniques into group norms, reducing the stigma associated with saying no. Finally, reflecting on the outcomes of boundary exercises sustains progress. After each refusal or negotiated compromise, individuals ask, "How did I feel? Was the relationship affected? And did I preserve my energy for priority work?" Journaling these reflections uncovers lessons, perhaps discovering that earlier deferral would have felt easier, or that a particular phrase elicited more understanding. This reflective loop refines boundary techniques, gradually reinforcing a confident, self-respecting stance. By mapping boundary zones, deploying pause and plan, negotiating compromises, setting availability markers, leveraging technology, rehearsing assertive language, and reflecting on outcomes, individuals construct a robust blueprint for protecting their time, energy, and emotional well-being. These techniques transform boundary setting from a source of anxiety into a sustainable practice that honors both personal limits and genuine social interest. Individuals seeking to uphold boundaries often find that knowing what to say is the linchpin of successful refusal. Clear, assertive communication scripts provide a framework for delivering no with confidence and respect, reducing guilt and minimizing pushback. These scripts combine acknowledgement of the request, a concise refusal, and when appropriate, an offer of an alternative. By practicing these phrases, one develops a repertoire of responses tailored to varied contexts, from casual social asks to high-stakes workplace demands, ensuring consistency and authenticity. A fundamental template begins with acknowledgement. "Thank you for thinking of me," or "I appreciate you asking." This opening conveys respect and gratitude, softening the transition into refusal. It signals that the request has been heard, which often satisfies the requester's need for recognition. For instance, when a colleague asks for help on a weekend project, one might respond, "I really appreciate you considering me for this, but I'm not able to take on extra work right now." The refusal follows the appreciation without apology or over-explanation, preserving dignity on both sides. When declining professional requests, specificity is crucial. Vague refusals, "Sorry, I can't," invite follow-up questions or assumptions about availability. Instead, a precise statement of limitation makes boundaries visible. "I'm focusing on our quarterly report this week, so I can't assist with the client proposal. This statement signals that the refusal is not personal but rooted in concrete commitments. It reassures the requester that one's boundaries are based on priorities rather than arbitrary unwillingness. Sometimes an outright no may seem too abrupt in ongoing relationships. In these cases, employing a defer and decline script creates breathing space. Thank you for asking. Let me check my schedule and get back to you by Friday. This buys time to assess capacity, and if the answer remains no, one can follow up with, after reviewing my priorities, I'm unable to help this time. Such two-step disclosure avoids knee-jerk commitments and models thoughtful decision-making. In social settings, refusal scripts often require balancing politeness with clarity. When friends invite someone to an event during a protected family time, the response might be, "Thanks for the invite, sounds fun, but Saturdays are family evenings for me. Hopefully next time." This phrasing maintains warmth while asserting the boundary. It also expresses interest in future opportunities, preventing relationship strain. For recurring requests, such as continual borrowing of personal items, using a policy statement clarifies general limits. "I've decided not to lend my tools anymore. I hope you understand." Framed as a personal policy, the refusal shifts from individual requests to a broad standard, reducing repeated negotiations. People learn to respect the guideline without expecting exceptions. Negotiated refusal scripts offer alternatives that preserve helpfulness without overextending one's capacity. A manager might say, "I'm unable to lead the new project, but I can provide feedback on your plan next Tuesday." Here, the refusal is paired with a scaled contribution, demonstrating ongoing support within realistic limits. This approach communicates willingness to help while drawing clear lines around the scope of assistance. Another effective script uses the "I can't, but I'm happy to" structure to convey boundary and goodwill. "I can't attend the weekend workshop, but I'm happy to review your slides beforehand." This tactic clearly differentiates between tasks that exceed capacity and those still within reach, preserving collaborative spirit. When requests trigger feelings of obligation, anchoring refusal in personal values can provide moral clarity. "I value my time with family, so I'm not available for late-night calls." This script aligns the boundary with a higher principle, making the refusal feel authentic rather than defensive. It invites understanding based on shared respect for values. Handling repeated pushback requires firmness and repetition of the refusal without additional justification. If a colleague persists after an initial no, one can respond, "I understand this is important, but as I mentioned, I cannot commit to this." Reiterating the refusal without wavering signals that the boundary is non-negotiable. Persistent requests after such affirmation reveal a lack of respect for limits rather than a miscommunication. In urgent scenarios where immediate clarity is needed, such as sudden requests during focused work, an assertive script might read, "I'm in the middle of an urgent task. I'll be available at 4 p.m. if you still need me." This response delineates a time frame and asserts the right to uninterrupted focus. It transforms the abrupt request into a scheduled appointment, normalizing boundary enforcement. Travel-related asks for impromptu assignments or weekend coverage benefit from contextual refusal scripts. "I'm out of town this week and won't have reliable connectivity." By referencing situational constraints, one anchors the refusal in objective facts rather than personal unwillingness. It reduces the likelihood of counteroffers or demands for exceptions. Digital boundaries demand equivalent clarity. When social media notifications or after-hours messages become intrusive, automated response scripts help. A status message might state, "I'm offline after 6 p.m. For urgent matters tomorrow morning, please email supportexample.com." This preempts inquiries and communicates that digital outreach will not receive immediate attention. For invitations based on guilt, such as family requests to attend every gathering, an affirmative exclusivity script clarifies selection. "I wish I could join every event, but I only have capacity for 2 gatherings each month. I'll pick one this time." By framing the boundary as a capacity choice rather than a moral deficit, the refusal feels less accusatory. It underscores that limits are a practical necessity. Role-based scripts support professionals in client-facing roles. Consultants, for example, might state, "Our retainer covers 3 hours of support weekly. Additional work would require a change order." This refusal enshrines limits in contractual terms, relaying that boundaries are part of agreed-upon arrangements rather than personal reluctance. In educational settings, teachers might adopt scripts like, "I'm available for tutoring during office hours on Tuesday. I can't offer extra sessions at other times." This clarity streamlines expectations and protects personal time while still offering structured support. Personal boundary scripts also apply to family dynamics. When relatives request financial favors, a script such as, "I've committed to a personal budget this year and can't lend money beyond emergencies," provides a clear rationale. It distinguishes between normal support and unsustainable patterns, reducing relational friction. Across all scripts, maintaining a calm tone and neutral body language reinforces the verbal refusal. Steady eye contact, relaxed posture, and a measured voice communicate assurance. Nervous gestures or apologetic inflections can undermine the message, inviting negotiation or guilt. Practicing these scripts in low-stakes scenarios builds confidence for more challenging refusals. Role-playing with a trusted friend or mirror practice familiarizes individuals with different phrasings. Recording and reviewing sessions deepens self-awareness and highlights areas for refinement, such as pacing or tone. Ultimately, assertive communication scripts equip individuals to say no firmly yet respectfully, preserving relationships while safeguarding personal limits. With repetition, these phrases transition from scripted recitations to authentic responses, embodying a boundary blueprint that balances confidence with compassion. Developing confident no skills demands deliberate practice combined with reflective insight. First, individuals create a boundary journal to record each instance they decline a request. Every entry notes the context, the specific script used, emotional responses before and after, and the requester's reaction. Over time, patterns emerge. Some scenarios elicit anxiety, others pass smoothly, and this data guides targeted skill building. For example, if refusing social invitations consistently triggers guilt, the journal highlights situations for additional rehearsal and cognitive reframing. Role-playing exercises reinforce adaptive responses. Individuals enlist a trusted friend or colleague to simulate requests that typically cause overwhelm. With each scripted scenario, such as an urgent ask at work or a family demand, they practice acknowledgement, concise refusal, and optional compromise. Immediate feedback focuses on tone, pacing, and body language. Critics note instances of hesitancy or over-apologizing, allowing practitioners to fine-tune assertive delivery. Regularly scheduled practice sessions, even brief ones before work or in lunch breaks, strengthen neural pathways for fluency, making authentic refusal more instinctive. Mindfulness reflection deepens self-awareness around boundary interactions. After each real-life refusal, individuals pause for a brief mindfulness exercise, breathing slowly while tuning into bodily sensations and mental narratives. Questions guide reflection. Which thoughts surfaced when refusing? Did old people-pleasing beliefs stir? How did the body respond? Tightness in the chest? Relaxation post-decline. By observing these internal cues without judgment, practitioners gain insight into their resistance points. Awareness of these triggers fosters emotional regulation, reducing the intensity of guilt or fear over time. Peer support groups provide communal reinforcement. In small cohorts, professionally or informally organized, members share recent boundary experiences, celebrate successes, and troubleshoot challenges. Group norms emphasize empathy and non-judgmental listening, creating a safe space to explore difficulties in refusing. Witnessing others' struggles and triumphs normalizes boundary-setting efforts and dispels the notion that saying no is inherently unkind. Peers exchange alternative scripts, offer real-life examples of effective refusals, and hold each other accountable for practicing newly learned techniques between meetings. Integrating habits into daily routines cements progress. Individuals schedule periodic boundary check-ins on their calendars, short reminders to review upcoming commitments, and assess alignment with priorities. During these check-ins, they adjust schedules, negotiate deferrals, or practice short refusal phrases internally to prime their mindset. Over time, this proactive habit shifts boundary setting from reactive defense to strategic life management, ensuring that no becomes a conscious tool rather than a last resort reaction. Celebrating boundary victories bolsters motivation. When a difficult refusal goes well, perhaps refusing a manager's ad hoc request, while maintaining respect and relationship, individuals consciously acknowledge the achievement. They might treat themselves to a small reward, such as a favorite coffee, or share the success with a supportive friend. Recognizing that refusal itself constitutes a form of self-care reframes no as an act of self-respect and communal integrity rather than selfish denial. Periodic reflection sessions synthesize lessons learned. Every month, individuals review their boundary journal and group support notes, identify recurring obstacles, and set specific improvement goals, perhaps to employ deferral scripts more consistently or to reinforce limits around digital after-hours messaging. They also update their internal motivation by revisiting personal values, why protecting focus time matters, and how saying no enhances the quality of their yeses. Articulating these whys renews commitment to boundary practices, ensuring continued growth. Finally, integrating boundary mastery into broader life skills fosters resilient self-worth. As individuals gain confidence in refusal, they discover newfound freedom to pursue meaningful goals. The capacity to allocate time and energy intentionally creates space for creative projects, deeper relationships, and self-care rituals. This rebalanced life validates Adler's principle that social interest flourishes when personal limits are honored. Confident no becomes not just a skill, but a gateway to sustainable cooperative living.